Here's something fantastic. What does God want? God created the world in 6 days. Did it really have to take him that long? I mean, how long does it take to say, let there be light? And that's all he did on the entire Sunday? He said, let there be light, and there was light. What did he do the rest of the day?
Play golf.
Probably. And why else do you need light? Let's quickly review. What happened on the first day of creation? God said, let there be light. What happened on the second day? God said, let the waters separate, and the dry land should... What happened on the third day? God said, let the earth give forth vegetation, trees and flowers. And what happened on the fourth day? God puts the sun, the moon, and the stars in their orbit. What happens on the fifth day? The small animals, mostly from the water. Let the water give forth creatures of all sorts. And then what happened on the sixth day? So the night of the sixth day, which means Thursday night, which is Friday, the large animals were created. And then midday on Friday, Adam and Chava are created. Each of the 7 days was an expression of one of the divine attributes. So the first day was Chesed, the second day was Gvura, the third day was Tiferes, or beauty, the fourth day was Netzach, and so on. So why are there 6 days? Because each attribute is a day. Because day means, Yom means revelation. Each day, one attribute was revealed. And it's not that there was a day, and in that day God revealed this attribute. When the attribute was revealed, that became a day. So days were created out of the attribute, not before. So each attribute becomes a day. Also, each day of the 6 days of creation represents 1,000 years of history. Because we know that by the year 6000, Mashiach has to come. That's the deadline. There can be only 6 days that are not holy, weekdays. After the 6th day, Shabbos has to happen, time is up, and Mashiach has to come. So each day is 1,000 years. We're also told that Mashiach will come before the deadline, not at the deadline. So now let's take a look. If you want to understand history, if you want to see exactly what's going on in the world, day number 1 is Chesed. Chesed means kindness. Kindness is beautiful, but it's indiscriminate. When a person is in a kind mood, he really doesn't care whether you deserve or not. He just wants to give everybody. He wants everybody to be happy. He wants everybody to have everything. It's indiscriminate. On the first day of creation, God said, let there be light. Light represents kindness. We're told that the light that God created on the first day of creation was way too much, too bright, too intense. And he had to withdraw it, and he tucked it away under his throne, saving it for the time of Mashiach. So on the first day of creation, there's already some preparation for Mashiach. But the light was too much. In fact, I believe that it was not withdrawn until Saturday night. So Saturday night was the first time there was darkness. And that's why we light the Havdalah, make a blessing over fire, because God showed Adam how to make fire, because it became dark for the first time. For the first time in their whole life, which was a day and a half. So they were created on Friday. Friday night there was no darkness. Saturday night was the first time that there was darkness. 1,000 years of history, from the year 1 to the year 1000. What was the world, what was that millennium? So the Gemara, the Mishnah says, there were 10 generations from Adam until Noach. They were all bad. They were terrible. And yet, they were not punished. Generation after generation, 1, 2, 3, 8, 9. They weren't punished because that was a millennium of kindness. Also, the animals were huge. Vegetables were huge. People lived to be 970 and some change. Everything was too much. Just like on the first day of creation, the light was too much. At the end of that millennium, the flood came. Kindness was withdrawn. It was too much. It was indiscriminate. Things were not working. The flood is punishment, justice, because the second day of creation is Gvura, judgment. What happened on the second day of creation? God separated the waters. If you get the picture here, originally when God created the world, there was earth, water, air, and fire. Earth was in the center. It was a solid ball surrounded by water. The water was surrounded by air, and the air was surrounded by energy, by fire. When God said, let the water separate, and the dry land should rise to the surface, the waters separated. Some of the waters went up to the heaven, to the sky. And the globe of earth broke into pieces, and the pieces floated to the surface. And that's what we now know as islands and continents. And we make a blessing every morning. We've been doing this for 1,100 years. We make a blessing every morning, thanking God for floating the earth on the water. Because all the continents are floating, they're drifting, continental drift, which wasn't discovered until the 20th century. But we've been making the bracha forever. So what happened on the second day of creation is that instead of indiscriminate kindness, you had judgment, discrimination. Some water should stay down, some water should go up. There were distinctions made. And in fact, the Medrash says that the waters that stayed below were crying. I don't know how you can tell when water is crying. I had a sour cream go bad. So the waters were crying. Why were we left down here when other waters went up to heaven? So you see that judgment always produces some pain or some unhappiness. God made up for it and promised the water that remained on earth that it would be used in the sacrifices in the temple on the happiest days of the year, which is Sukkot and Simchas Torah and Simchas Beis HaShoeva. The second millennium was 1,000 years of judgment. So what happened in the second millennium? The flood and the Tower of Babel, the dispersion. The flood is an expression of judgment, punishment. And how was it expressed? In water. Just as the judgment on the second day of creation was expressed in the water. So people could have been punished many different ways. Why a flood? Because it's a reflection of the second day of creation. The other thing that happened in that millennium, from the year 1000 to the year 2000, was the dispersion. All people lived together in the valley of Shinar, and they got together on a project, and they built this tower that was going to reach into the heavens because they didn't believe in God. They didn't believe that the flood was from God. They believed that the flood was a natural, recurring event. Every 1,000 years, the world will flood. And so you got to get off this planet. So they were building this tower to reach beyond Earth's atmosphere, and from there they would launch themselves to the moon. So for their lack of faith, not believing what Noach told them, that the flood came as a punishment for, so instead of killing them, God dispersed them. All of a sudden, as they're working on this project, people started speaking different languages. So they couldn't communicate, and the project came to a halt. There's a powerful lesson in that. If you don't communicate, every project is going to fall apart. So in running a company and running a team, whatever it is, when people need to work together, the main thing is they got to talk the same language. They got to understand each other. Now, once they started speaking different languages, they naturally drifted apart. People who had a common language set up their own cities, built their own communities, and the world started to disperse. The third day of creation is compassion, which is called Tiferes, or beauty, because beauty is the result of harmony. Nothing in its stark, unbalanced condition can be called beautiful. Like, is red beautiful? Red is red. Is green beautiful? It's green. But if you blend a certain amount of red with a certain amount of green, and you get a shade of red, oh, that can be beautiful. The harmony between the two colors produces beauty. And the same is true with facial beauty. Is a nose beautiful? A nose is a nose. You can't call it beautiful. What makes it beautiful is it works very well with the rest of your face. Put it on somebody else's face, no, it doesn't work so good. So what produces beauty? The harmony. Harmony is a form of humility. When the red allows some of the green to blend with it, when the green agrees to blend with the red, that's beautiful. In a world of chaos, nothing blends because there's no humility, there's no flexing. Red is red and does not allow green. Green is green and it will not tolerate red. And then you have no beauty. So beauty comes from the absence of conflict, from harmony. A person under stress, a person torn in two directions, does not look good. Not pleasant to look at. A person who is at peace, a person who is balanced and is in harmony in his life is pleasant to look at, because you see the absence of tension, the absence of conflict. There's a guy who wrote a book called 9.5 Mystics, a long time ago. He was a Reform rabbi, but he was interested in mysticism. So he went and interviewed 9 mystics, or what he thought were mystics. And he wrote up the interview in his book. 9.5 mystics, because he considered himself a half mystic. So he's a Reformed rabbi, but half a mystic. One of the people he interviewed was the Rebbe. But he came for his appointment and was told that he would have to wait a while because there's a long line of people visiting the Rebbe that night. So in the meantime, he sat in the yeshiva, in the study hall, with the students. When he finally got into the Rebbe's room, he was surprised that he felt so comfortable. You know, he came with his clipboard, with a pad, he was going to do a formal interview. But when he sat down in the Rebbe's room, he felt so comfortable that he put aside his clipboard and he said, you know, I was talking to your students, and they have this naive look. They're so naive. Their eyes are so... He said, is this healthy when they get out into the real world? How are they going to handle it? So the Rebbe said, what you're seeing in their eyes is not naivete. They're not naive. What you're seeing in their eyes is a lack of conflict. There's no split. The Rebbe used the Hebrew word. There's no kera. There's no split in their eyes because they're not trying to live in two worlds. You look like you haven't slept well. And that's not good for your health. And the Rebbe said, if they were naive, what would happen to them when I send them out into a community where they are the only Hasidim, maybe the only observant Jew, maybe the only Shomer Shabbos? What would happen to them if they were naive? They would quickly get assimilated and caught up in the... That's not what happens. They go to a city where they are the only ones and come back 10 years later, and there's a community. They create a community. And that doesn't happen if you're naive. So it's not naivete, it's the innocence of knowing which world you live in, not torn between two worlds. So that's beauty. That is compassion, because compassion is a blend of kindness and judgment. Because what does compassion mean? That I'm going to be nice to you. But what are the circumstances? Why am I being nice to you? Because you're in trouble. Because you got yourself in a mess. You are found guilty and therefore deserving of punishment. And that bothers me. I hate to see you suffer. But if you're not guilty, and if you're not suffering, why would I feel compassion for you? If you're innocent and not suffering, then kindness is appropriate. So what is compassion? Compassion means there was a judgment, and you're guilty. And we're not whitewashing it. We're saying, yes, you're guilty, but circumstances, people need you. So I want to be kind to you despite the judgment. So it's a blend of kindness and severity, and it produces a third and new emotion called compassion. What happened on the third millennium, from the year 2000 to the year 3000? God put the sun in God said, let the earth give forth vegetation. So what happened was this ugly, barren earth suddenly became beautiful. And what made it beautiful? The blend of colors. It's not that the earth became green. Green is not beautiful. But when you have 14 shades of green, and they all work nicely with each other, that's beautiful. Also, this is the first thing that was created out of something else. God said, let there be light, and there was light out of nowhere. God said, let the water separate. Nothing new was created. For the first time, on the third day of creation, God said, let the earth produce something. The fruits of the earth. In the third millennium, Avraham came on the scene, who started to teach the world godliness, belief in one God, not in idols. And then the Torah was given in the year 2448. So between the year 2000 and the year 3000, Avraham was born in 1948. Don't tell me you forgot your grandfather's birthday. So he was born just before the year 2000, and the Torah was given just into the third millennium. What is the Torah? The Torah is the beauty of the world, the ability to bring peace to the world. Torah is meant to bring peace, harmony, and the earth was starting to produce some fruit. It was becoming a productive world. People were doing mitzvahs. The fourth day of creation is the attribute of Netzach. Netzach is like the right leg that supports the right arm. The right arm is kindness, chesed. Under the chesed, there's the right leg that gives the kindness a stability. So it's a reduced form of kindness. What happened on the fourth day of creation from the year 3000 to the year 4000? The little beasts, the sun and the moon were put into their orbit. What happened on the day of kindness? God said, let there be light. The reduced kindness, sun and moon, light, but a reduced light, not an infinite light, and a restricted light. The sun will shine during the day, the moon will shine during the night, so it's a much more tolerable light. So you see the similarity between the first day and the fourth day. They're both about lights. What happened in that millennium from the year 4000 to the year 5000? Yeah? No, from the year 3000 to the year 4000. The first Beis Hamikdash was built, as bright as the sun. The second Beis Hamikdash, as bright as the moon, and thousands of prophets, like the stars in the sky. 1,000 points of light. So that millennium, from the year 3000 to the year 4000, was dominated by light. Different forms of light. And that's the attribute of Netzach. Netzach means even when the sun sets, you persevere. It's a victory. Just because the sun set doesn't mean you lose. It's replaced by the moon. The fifth day of creation is the attribute of Hod, and that's the left leg, which is the support to the left arm, which is severity. So if the left arm is Gevura and judgment, then the left leg is like a lower level, reduced kind of judgment. What happened on that day? God created the little creatures, the little monsters, most of them not kosher, and they do not get along, and they don't work well as a group. They're little monsters, every one of them with their own opinion, with their own judgment, and they're antagonistic. What happened in the millennium between the year 4000 and the year 5000, these were the Middle Ages. This was when the world was dominated by little dictators, little monsters. Everyone who owned a piece of land was the lord over the serfs that worked in the land. They could kill them, they could torture them, they could imprison them. It was a dark time. Bad. The sixth day of creation is the attribute called yesod, or foundation. It's down to the fundamentals. What is the fundamental? The tzaddik. The world was created for goodness, for people to be good. That's the foundation. That's what it's all built on. So that's the day that Adam and Chava were created. But also during the nighttime of the sixth day, the big animals were created, meaning the big monsters. What happened in the sixth millennium, from the year 5000 to the year 6000? We had the big monsters: Stalin, Hitler, the big dictators, the huge monsters. And at the same time, we had the birth and the development of the kind of leader who was called tzaddik. The Baal Shem Tov and all of his followers were called tzaddikim. Beforehand, we had leaders who were called sages. Before that, they were called judges. Before that, they were called kings. Before that, they were called prophets. Before that, they were called patriarchs. And before that, there was Adam and Chava, Ma and Pa. So you see the different forms of leadership with different titles. At the time of the Baal Shem Tov, it was the tzaddik, the foundation of the world. If we break a day into night and daytime, the night would be 500 years, and the day would be 500 years, right? Because a day is 1,000 years. So if we want to get to the morning, Friday morning, in the cosmic picture, on the cosmic calendar, what year would be the year that represents Friday morning? It would be 5,500. If you break that into morning and afternoon, how do we get to Friday afternoon? That would be another 250 years, right? That would be the year 5,750. Where are we today? 5,770, almost 8. In other words, we are past noon. Since God promised that Mashiach will come before the deadline, it's pretty much time for Mashiach. I mean, if you're going to come before the deadline, it's not going to be 10 minutes before the deadline. It's got to be a significant time. Huh? So what's left, 200 or so years? That's nothing. So now is the time for Mashiach. If he comes any later than this, then it's not really early anymore. The early is almost gone. So it's really interesting. The Baal Shem Tov was born just before the year 5,500, and the Alter Rebbe was born just after the year 5,500. So where are we today in the big picture? We are Friday afternoon. It's time to get ready for Shabbos. So things are a little chaotic. We don't know what to do first. and who has the shoe polish? And who bought the challah? And will somebody take the cholent, put the cholent on the fire and take the kugel off the fire? It's chaos. But it's preparation for Shabbos. So when the Rebbe said it is time for Mashiach, it wasn't a wish. It wasn't saying, if we really are good, maybe Mashiach will come in our time. No, it's not up to us, our being good. Mashiach has to come because the time is up. And because the time is up and Mashiach is going to arrive any minute, that's why you got to run out into the streets and get Jews to put on tefillin and light Shabbos candles and whatever else you can get them to do, because you don't want them to stand there like a goylem when Mashiach arrives saying, oh, what's happening? So we don't want to just live to see Mashiach come. We want to be able to say, I pitched in. I helped prepare the world. I helped get ready. So we want every Jew to feel like a participant, not like a spectator. But whether we participate or not, Mashiach is coming. So the Rebbe's urgency was not so much to bring Mashiach, it was the urgency to get everybody participating so that nobody is left out and feels like a stranger when Mashiach comes. So it's simply out of love for every Jew that the Rebbe became so urgent about tell people, get them involved. Otherwise, they'll be a little embarrassed. Like, Mashiach came here, and what did you do? Well, I wasn't ready. You didn't tell me. That shouldn't happen, right? The Rebbe also introduced something really, really radical and new. Unprecedented. For 3,000 years since the giving of the Torah, what have the good people in the world been doing? What have we been doing? If a person is good, he tries to do the right thing. When a person is good, he tries to be kind, he tries to be patient. He works on himself to become a little more wise, a little more responsible, a little more diligent. You got to become a mensch. Didn't your grandmother say? You got to be a mensch. And if somebody misbehaved, it was like, oh, you're not a mensch. Be a mensch. I remember being very frustrated. The first time I was told to be a mensch is when I was lazy. So I thought, okay, being a mensch means don't be lazy. But then one day I did something really nasty to my brother, and my mother said, can't you be a mensch? I said, I am a mensch. I'm not lazy. So all of a sudden, being a mensch meant be nice to your brother. Oh, okay. And then all of a sudden, something else happened, and I said, that's not how a mensch behaves. So what do I do now? What does it take to be a mensch? All of the above. If you're lazy, you're not a mensch. If you're cruel, you're not a mensch. If you lie, you're not a mensch. So we had a huge job. Be a mensch, be a mensch. Raise your children to be menschen. What's wrong with you? And for the most part, we achieved amazing things. Human beings who by nature are wild beasts became decent. We became mensch. But it went a little too far. What you gotta be the best you can be. It has become narcissistic. If all the focus is on me, I gotta be, I have to become, I have to develop, I have to produce, eventually it becomes too much. And so it started to turn around. It's like, I have my rights. You can't tell me what to do. You're not the boss of me. Me, I gotta have I got to do it my way. I did it my way. I got to be me. Terrible. It now has become such unmensch, where everything is about me, and I am not fair, and if you don't give me, I quit. We're becoming little brats. So what the Rebbe did, let's just look at the history of Chabad. If you want to get a real good insight into the history of Chabad, the first Chabad Rebbe said, it's not enough to just do what you do because you're told to do it and you believe that it's good, and so you just continue the habit. You got to have Chabad. Chabad means Chochma, Bina, Das, and that means that you have to internalize. You have to ingest the truth of Torah until it becomes you. It's not enough to just be obedient. Let me give you a quick analogy. I hope Rabbi Lau will speak long so we have time. A mother says to her son, make me tea. Bring me a cup of tea. A nice hot cup of tea. 3 times a day. Every day. The son brings his mother tea 3 times a day, every day, for 50 years. At the end of 50 years, he discovers that his mother never drinks tea. She don't like it, she don't need it, she never drinks it. So he says to his mother, what was that all about? You asked me to bring you tea and you don't even drink it? And the mother says very wisely, what do I need tea? You think I need tea? I asked you to make me tea 3 times a day, every day for 50 years, because I wanted to give you an opportunity to get closer to me, that we should be close. Sounds very nice. Aida Shemama, right? It's horrible. It's really nasty. Because if she doesn't need tea, if she doesn't use tea, then tea is not part of her life. So if she has her son busy making tea, and tea is not part of her life, how does that bring him closer to her? It's the opposite. She kept him busy with tea and effectively kept him out of her life. It's like when somebody's annoying you, like these nudniks, you know, and you want to get rid of them, what do? You say, can you do me a favor? Run around the corner and see if it's raining. That'll bring us close. No, it won't. You're keeping him out of your life. To prove the point, imagine that the son discovers the next day that the mother loves coffee. She lives for coffee. And she asked his brother to make her coffee every day, 3 times a day for 50 years. Now how does he feel? Oh, so what you need and what you love and what you enjoy, you asked him to bring. Me, you kept busy with something that is not important to you, that is not part of your life, that is not... When God gives us mitzvahs and says, put on tefillin every day, light a Shabbos candle, eat kosher, give tzedakah, keep Shabbos. Is that tea or is that coffee? We say that a mitzvah brings you closer to God. In fact, the word mitzvah means connection, right? When you do a mitzvah, you get closer to God. Why? He asked you to do it, and you're doing it, you bring... But that's only if it's coffee. If the mitzvah to God is tea, you haven't gotten any closer. He's keeping you busy with stuff he doesn't need. So when we say a mitzvah gets you closer, it's because the mitzvah is coffee. This is God's life. This is God. This is God's pleasure. This is Him. So when you do the mitzvah, you are getting closer to Him. Whereas if it were tea, then you would get a very high mark for obedience. You make tea for your mother 3 times a day for 50 years because she asked you to, you are very obedient. But you're not close. Obedience is from a distance. You obey a king because he'll never be your friend. You obey the principal because he scares you. That's not closeness. So the Alter Rebbe said, we got to understand, we're not making tea for God when we do mitzvahs or study Torah. Judaism is not about obedience, it's about closeness. So internalize, make it personal, understand it. The later generation in Chabad demanded self-sacrifice. Living in Russia, all the obstacles to Yiddishkeit, the Tsars trying to stop Judaism, and then communism started. For 3 generations, until the end of the war, until actually the end of communism, the attribute, the quality that Hasidim needed to develop was the conviction that does not allow you to deviate even in a detail. Mesiras Nefesh. And a book must be written someday on this chapter of Jewish history where Hasidim, under the Tsar and under communism, did not compromise a single Jewish custom. A Chassid who had been in prison for 8 years, in gulags and whatever, he finally got out. He survived. Amazing story in itself. Now he's back in Moscow, and it's Shabbos afternoon, and he's walking down the street, and he sees this familiar face getting off the bus on Shabbos. And he realizes this guy was a former Rosh Yeshiva. He used to be the head of a great yeshiva before communism. And he's getting off the bus on Shabbos. So Mendel, the chassid, says to him, Shabbos? He says, I bought the ticket before Shabbos. And Mendel says, Shabbos? And he says, the bus didn't stop just for me. There were other people. And Mendel says, Shabbos? So the guy says, you don't understand. I'm going to a meeting with the KGB. They called me. They summoned me. I have to go. Mendel says, Shabbos? There was no wiggle room. Shabbos is Shabbos. You bought the ticket before, you bought the ticket. The bus did stop for you, didn't stop for you. It's Shabbos. We don't compromise. Ever. The KGB are calling you? It's Shabbos. That was the result of 3 generations of developing this powerful strength of commitment and determination that nothing can shake. So now we have 6 generations of Hasidic teachings that produced very wise, strong, determined, and self-sacrificing Jews. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. The Rebbe came along, the 7th generation, and he said, God is waiting. God is waiting. The whole world is his plan. He planned the whole thing. He needs something to happen. It's got to happen. He's waiting. Got to serve God. In other words, he switched, he moved the attention, the focus, and the urgency from you got to be a mensch, you got to be a chassid, you got to be a good Jew, you have to be a devoted Jew, you have to have more courage, you have to stand strong. And he said, okay, enough with you. Now God needs a result. I heard the story that when the Rebbe was 3 years old, he was walking in Nikolaev, where he was born. He was walking in the streets. It was a hot summer day, and somebody said to him, "Ingele, take off the big yarmulke, it's hot." And the 3-year-old Rebbe said, "You're not allowed." So the man said, "It's okay, the sin will be on me. Don't worry about it, the sin will be on me." And the Rebbe said, "What's the difference who sins? You're not allowed to sin. Doesn't matter who. In other words, God doesn't like it. So what's the difference whether I do it, you do it, it's my fault, your fault?" So the Rebbe shifted our attention from what we need to be to what God needs to have. Huge shift. And that's an indication that we are coming around the corner. We're coming around the home stretch. Because, yes, we have to be a mensch. You have to develop. You have to prepare yourself. But prepare yourself for what? And that's a very good question. Your mother wants you to be a mensch, which is good. You have to be a mensch for what? Why? So you get into college? You don't have to be a mensch to get into college. That was in the olden days. You got to be a mensch so that somebody will want to marry you. Why do you have to be a mensch? For whose benefit? We realize now you have to be a mensch for the benefit of others, not for your own benefit. So there's no narcissism, there's no selfishness in becoming a mensch. I gotta be the best I can be. No. You gotta prepare yourself to be of the most use, of the greatest blessing to everyone around you. Don't take it personal. It's service. And mainly, it's service for God. So what is our future? Our future is that Mashiach is going to come and we're going to say, "Where were you?" I told somebody, 6 years ago, I told somebody, Mashiach is coming this year. He said, "Watch it, because if he doesn't come, people will be very angry at you." I said, "Excuse me? If he doesn't come, they'll be angry at me? He's 2,000 years too late and you're angry at me?" It's not, "Well, you promised." I promised. So Mashiach is going to come and we're going to say, "Where were you?" Be a mensch. Don't keep us waiting like this. We are going to be able to say, even our children, young children will be able to say, "We brought you. We did what was necessary to prepare the world for you." We're not spectators, we are participants. And I think that sums up JLI perfectly. You agree?
Thanks for watching. Click subscribe and hit the notification bell below for daily pearls of Jewish wisdom.